Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Dolahan, and I had a pre-birth experience that I want to share with all of you that I think was really powerful. And I've recently have, kind of gotten guidance around that this is a really important experience to share for a lot of people because it's kind of the other bookend to the near-death experience. So what I remember is it must have been a couple of hours before my birth, but maybe it was days. I mean, I wouldn't know because in that realm, there's no time and space the way that we experience it here in this dimension on this planet. And what I remember at first is sort of just being in this like pink, beautiful, there was a lot of light around me. So there was like pinks, and the reason why I'm closing my eyes is because that's the way I can remember it better. There were pinks, and there was like light colors and reds, and it was sort of like interchanging, and it was really beautiful. It sort of was a space that was both like material in the sense that, like a human mind could wrap itself around it, but it was also non-material. But it was beautiful, and it was warm. It was incredibly warm, and it was just great. And I didn't have any pain. It was just such a beautiful place. And it was full of love and full of joy and full of all the good things, that bliss. It was blissful back there. And so I was in this space, and I remember myself sort of walking down this path that wasn't really a path in human terms, but that's just the only way I can kind of describe it. Is it was a path, like I was floating. I was also not in a body the way that I am in now. I perceived myself more of like a light being or light energy sort of floating down this path. And what I remember also is that to my left, there were some kind of like buildings. They were kind of like cubicle kind of style buildings. And what I kind of knew was I sort of come from those buildings, and there were training buildings, or there were buildings where I had planned my existence, where, I had sat with different committees and different other soul friends that wanted to incarnate with me, that had sort of helped me plan this lifetime and think through what I wanted to do in this lifetime and why I wanted to incarnate on planet Earth and all of these things. So I was walking from these buildings, and next to me was a really tall figure. And this figure was ever loving. It didn't have a sense of that being was incarnating on planet Earth still. It felt more like that being was sort of like a mentor to me, like a teacher, like somebody who was guiding me and mentoring me and helping me to kind of, get to the place where I would depart into this new lifetime. And I remember we had sort of a telepathic communication. So we were talking, and at the same time, I sort of felt this godly presence sort of above me. And everything kind of happened simultaneous in this space. It's really beautiful because when I came into this existence, words and the human like body is just so tedious and so heavy and so just awkward. And over there, you can be downloaded with knowledge and wisdom and experience and, in like a split second, because everything is just telepathic and your energy. So you're merging with everything. And it was just beautiful. So I was kind of sort of having a conversation, for lack of a better, word, with this mentor next to me, as well as with like God or the higher source consciousness that was just downloading me with spiritual information at light speed. And it was almost like I had all my lifetimes and everything, my entire existence since, the spark of my soul had sparked sort of right there. And it was just kind of downloaded into me. So anyway, we were walking, and I was not happy about the fact that I would incarnate on planet Earth. And I was kind of bargaining with the figure next to me. And I was saying, well, do I really need to go? I know we discussed this. I know I agreed that this would be the best thing for me, that I had to kind of go back to that place. But, I've been through this like many, 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 many times, and it's really hard down there. And and having a body is really hard. And I just love being here, and I would just love to stay here and rest a little more. And it was kind of made clear to me from this being that, like, no, we discussed this. We discussed that this was the best way. This was the best, course of action at this point for you. Now, in this saying, it was more of like, when your mom says, spinach is good for you. You might not necessarily like spinach, but spinach is really good for our health, right? So it was kind of like that. It was kind of like incarnating on planet Earth is the best free will choice you could make at this point, because it's really going to kind of light speed you through your soul's evolution, and that's what we want. We want you to go there so that, you know, your soul can evolve. And so I was like, okay, I know I need to go, but I really didn't want to go. I was kind of bargaining with him, and I was like, do I really have to go? Can I maybe just stay 5 more minutes? You know, kind of like that thing, even though I didn't have time. But it was sort of like that conversation. And he was like, we talked about this. And he was very calm. He was actually kind of like fatherly almost. I perceived him as a male energy, and he was very tall. He had like these darker purple sort of robes that he was wearing. No face or anything like that. I really just perceived him as this energy. But he was very calm and very peaceful and very loving and very fatherly. And he was kind of like, come on, I mean, we talked about this. We know this is good for you. We know. And I said, well, but if I have to go, can I at least do it really quick and like get as much out of the way, like kind of just bang it out, so this can be sort of like one of the last times I have to go to this place, or maybe even the last time. And he was like, well, might not be your last time, but it's, you know, you have free choice. So you can, of course, you know, do more, like do extracurricular stuff, sort of like that, and get a lot more done than, you know, you wanted to get done. I mean, it's really up to you what you do down there. We're just making recommendations of what should be. And so I remember in that instance thinking like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to speed through stuff. I'm just going to bang it all out, so that this probably not going to be my last lifetime here, but, you know, can be one of the last ones that, you know, I don't have like hundreds and hundreds of more lifetimes to come down here. So anyway, we got to this place. And the reason why I have this thing behind me is actually, and this is a pretty cool story, this is the place I was in, and I will explain that in a second. But we got to this place, and it was sort of like a helicopter hub. It was round, and it was a vortex, and it was spinning. And I could see other souls with similar mentors of that same nature standing there, also getting ready to be birthed. And they were standing there, and they were sort of telepathically communicating amongst them, but I couldn't tap into that because it wasn't important for me. I just kind of, you know, there was just love exchange. There was just kind of like this, oh, okay, they're also going, they're also incarnating. So I was standing there, and I kind of knew, oh my God, now it's coming. Like, I'm going to have to go. And there was sort of this bittersweetness of, I really didn't want to go. I kept bargaining with him, and I was like, do I really need to go? And I think he kind of knew that if we would continue this, you know, I would never go, and, you know, and maybe have missed the chance, you know, my chance in this lifetime. So he actually pushed me into the vortex. And when he pushed me, before he pushed me, actually, he said to me, he said, you know, you need to go, but you also know that we're always here. You know, you can always reach out to us. It's just via the mind. You reach out to us and we'll help you. And I was like, okay. And then that moment he pushed me, and I felt a bit of like, man, why did he do that? And I fell backwards into that vortex. I was sort of sucked into the vortex, and it just kind of fell. I fell and fell and fell. And it was sort of like what a lot of near-death experiences describe as that tunnel. It was just the other way around, almost like that two-way street, and I was just going the other way around. And at some point, there was a shift in point, and then I slammed into my body. Everything was super bright. I slammed into my body. It was painful. I could feel myself taking a breath and thinking, oh, that again. Now I have to breathe. And it was just painful, and it was awful, and it was cold, and there was a bright light. And I was not pleased because it was just, ugh. And then I just kind of fell into like a coma of some sorts. I just kind of passed out after that, because I was just like, okay, here we go. You know, I mean, I'm back here. Cool. I guess I'm going to make the most of it. And so that's kind of the initial experience. So let me go to this here. This is a pretty cool thing, because years ago, actually, I met an intuitive artist who does these sacred mandalas, and he recently made this one. And he showed me, and he was like, I don't know, you know, I kind of created this, and we were also on the phone, I think, when he created it. And I saw it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is where I came from. This is the hub I was standing in, that like vortex that I was standing in. And this is literally the vortex I was sucked through. This is the womb. So it's sort of like the energetics that are being sucked through the womb. And then this is where I came out. And this is sort of the changing point where it changed. And then I kind of rushed out from underneath there. And that was, then the material when I was slammed into my body. And what's also interesting is that my mom will tell this story. So I was born in 1987 and I was born in Switzerland. And at the time it was practice to take the babies away from the moms and put them, weigh them and all that and wash them. And then, put them in their little like bassinets and wheel them into the nursery. And my mom came to visit me the next day after my birth to see me. And she says that there were, probably like maybe 30 babies all around me. And I was smack in the middle. And all of these babies were screaming and it was loud in there. And me, I was smack in the middle, just sleeping. And when I would tell my mom about my pre-birth experience, I was like, that would make sense because I was really exhausted. I really, I came here very reluctantly, and I was pretty much a sleeping baby, pretty easy baby throughout my baby stages. I still had some like memories that kind of trickled up as I think my soul was integrating with my body. One of the most recent ones was I must have been a couple of days old and I was like staring up out of my crib and I have all these family members sort of stand around me and look at me and do like the gaga goo chi goo 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 goo, and like things in my face and whatever. And I'm thinking like looking up at them and thinking, I'm a fully conscious, fully aware, thinking person in here. You don't need to do the goo goo gaga gichi goo goo with me. And feeling sort of dismayed at that. And then sort of just falling asleep again because that was the best way I could just escape the fact that I was in my body again. And then just having, memories maybe as like a pre-1-year-old. I was just barely walking and thinking, there's several memories. One where I was just kind of having memories of past lives, my most recent past life, and just past lives of, why I had chosen this lifetime and why specifically, even I chose my physiology and all of that. And then that kind of fainted. And then one memory where my mom would call me Christine. And I remember thinking, Christine, oh, that's a really strange name. Why am I called Christine now? And remembering the name that I had before, which I liked much better. I think it was like Lisa or something like that, and the lifetime before. And I'm thinking, why can't I just be that? Like, why can't I just be Lisa? I don't really like the name Christine. And then that's kind of where my memory stopped. And I sort of integrated into my mush brain, my baby self. And, I don't have any more memories of my childhood up until like maybe when I 2 or 3. It's just kind of, it's literally like my soul just mushed and integrated with my body. And then I was just a normal child. What we were talking about earlier, the brain sort of being this mush self where people say, well, it's not even possible you could remember your birth. But I still had this memory, and this memory was super clear to me. I remember this as if this was yesterday, and I can't even remember what I made my kids for like lunch yesterday. So this is like super clear, more clear than anything in this world, in this dimension. So I would tell my mom, I would tell her, I remember my birth and my parents being sort of agnostics, not really believing in anything spiritual, being very scientific and very skeptical, would say, that's not possible. You can't possibly remember your birth. That must have been a dream. And me being very confused as a child and thinking, nah, that wasn't a dream. I know what dreams are like. Dreams are really murky. I can't, this was not a dream. But then kind of just thinking, okay, well, my parents are telling me this was a dream, so maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I should just not share this at all with anybody because this seems to be not accepted. And so I just bury it within me. But it would always kind of trickle up, and I would always wonder about it and being like, well, what was this really? What was this memory? And so I'd like, Google it once in a while when I was a teenager and then into my 20s. I wasn't able to find anybody else who had experiences like this. However, I was able to find people who had near-death experiences. And so I was like, well, that's the best way to, to start my research. So it happened actually that in my early 20s, a good childhood friend of mine passed away, and that really hit me very hard. Because, he was a baby when I was 3 years old and they were really close friends of my family. And it just hit me really hard that somebody could pass away so fast, so tragically. And it really made me sort of explore that pre-birth experience. And I was thinking, well, okay, I was very skeptical and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to approach this really scientific. and I'm going to do research and I'm going to find data on it. And then I'm not just going to read woo-woo books, but I'm really going to look at the whole picture. And I started exploring near-death experiences and reading everything I could get on near-death experiences and all of that. At the time, also, I was in a place where I felt really lost. So I was, my early 20s, felt really lost. I was studying art history in Germany. It was okay. It was fun, but it was kind of like, is this really what I'm meant to do? This doesn't feel it doesn't really resonate. And I see other people being really passionate about what they were doing, whether it was in their, studies or in their careers or even just in their hobbies. And I couldn't find that kind of passion. So I was kind of like lost. And as a result of it, kind of indulged in a lot of really unhealthy habits. Well, one of them being, an alcohol and party habit that I had at the time. And at one point, I had a really awful relationship at the time, and it was just really bad. And the night sort of ended up at the steps of a church where I was just crying so much and thinking, this can't possibly be the reason why I'm here. And so all of that accumulated, all that like darkness that I was feeling and experiencing, I was always brought back to this pre-birth experience. And I was like, okay, I can either continue this dark path, or I can actually really take, be courageous and explore this against, my background, my agnostic background, or the background that, this isn't really accepted. This is all just woo-woo stuff. So I started actually really studying it. And that's what got me on. I was doing a PhD in art history, and I stopped that and I started looking into doctorates and PhDs that would help me understand this from a scientific standpoint too, because I said, well, if there's data around it, or even just anecdotal data, even just, qualitative data, meaning stories about this or people who've experienced it, and it all links up and there's similar themes, then there's something to it. And if those similar themes linked my pre-birth experience, then this was something real, and I really needed that for myself. So that kind of embarked me on 7-year plus deep research, study journey, where I would read everything I could get on near-death experiences and early incarnation experiences of children. And all of what I read got me really excited because it's exactly what I experienced. And with the near death, a lot of the elements are like, it's more than real. There's ancestors or there's loving beings. It's such unconditional love. You get downloaded, you communicate telepathically. So everything, and then the tunnel, I flew through that tunnel too. It was just backwards. So all of that kind of linked up, and I realized, oh wow, this is one bookend to the next. But I still didn't share it for quite a while because, there was still this sort of stigma around it, or this like, or people are going to think I'm totally crazy if I share this. So it was only recently that I started sharing it with some people, and they all encouraged me, including my inner intuition and guidance, to share it in a bigger way, because I feel like the world is ready to hear this experience. So that's the entire experience that I had.